All right, welcome back to the show, Coast to Coast Sports. My name is Levi. It's been a week. I had a nice little break, little vacation. Actually, it wasn't all that nice. I had to do a lot of homework. That's where I've been, but let's get back into it. We're going to recap. We're going to have two episodes dropping tonight. One of them is going to be NFL Week 5, and the other one's going to be NFL Week 6. So we'll start with Week 5, and let's start with Texans-Bills, probably the biggest game of that week, and a thriller, which it didn't feel like it would be early in the game. Texans jumped out to a big lead. I think it was 20-3. And you're thinking, man, Josh looks terrible, and he did. He played horribly, and CJ looks great. And the big takeaway, a couple takeaways, but the first takeaway is that the Texans are legitimately, and I believe this already. Preseason, I said I think the Texans can win the Super Bowl. And I still think they can. I think other than Kansas City, Houston, Detroit, and maybe Minnesota, if it can last, if they can keep it up, that's kind of these teams can win the Super Bowl. So 3 or 4. Kansas City's obviously Detroit and Houston. I would lean Kansas City right now till they lose. It's tough to bet against them. But Houston's right there. And all of the any of the kind of bad taste in the mouth that we harbored from that Vikings loss, that's all gone. That's all gone. And part of that loss, let's be honest here. Let's remember, CJ was sick. That was their first game without Joe Mixon. Mixon got hurt during that game. So that could be why they lost to Minnesota. They might be better than Minnesota at full health. I don't know. Either way. So the Texans looked great. Nico Collins did get hurt, and that is concerning going forward. We'll see how they do, but I think Stephon Diggs can keep them afloat, and Tank Dell. They have weapons. Robert Woods and Mixon's going to be back soon. So that's, they're fine on weapons, I think. The Bills' take is that despite Allen playing terribly, they stayed in it. And that is something that we don't normally see from Buffalo. Josh Allen, 9 for 30. I'm pretty sure I read it's the worst completion percentage by any quarterback ever when attempting 20 or more passes in a game. So he was not good, but no turnovers. And again, he did get his head hit really hard. I think maybe he had like a minor concussion. Probably shouldn't have even been playing. But again, the Bills battled back from a deficit even with Allen playing poorly. And no Khalil Shakir. James Cook playing a big role in that. The run game. They have a run game. They have, a solid defense. They got to a point where they could have won the game in the last drive. And they ended up losing by 23-20. That tells me that the Bills are a good football team. Because if you can compete against a great team when your quarterback is not playing well and your starting wide receiver is out, that is a sign of a great team. Because the rest of the team picked it up when Allen was struggling and with no Shakir. Now, again, do I think either of these teams can beat the Chiefs? No, I don't. Not right now, at least. But they both play them at some point this season, so that'll be kind of the metric test. They've both proved that they're good. Now the question is, how good? All right, welcome back to the show, Coast to Coast Sports. My name is Levi. It's been a week. I had a nice little break, little vacation. Actually, it wasn't all that nice. I had to do a lot of homework. That's where I've been, but let's get back into it. We're going to recap. We're going to have two episodes dropping tonight. One of them is going to be NFL Week 5, and the other one's going to be NFL Week 6. So we'll start with Week 5, and let's start with Texans-Bills, probably the biggest game of that week, and a thriller, which it didn't feel like it would be early in the game. Texans jumped out to a big lead. I think it was 20-3. And you're thinking, man, Josh looks terrible, and he did. He played horribly, and CJ looks great. And the big takeaway, a couple takeaways, but the first takeaway is that the Texans are legitimately, and I believe this already. Preseason, I said I think the Texans can win the Super Bowl. And I still think they can. I think other than Kansas City, Houston, Detroit, and maybe Minnesota, if it can last, if they can keep it up, that's kind of my, these teams can win the Super Bowl. So 3 or 4. Kansas City's obviously Detroit and Houston. I would lean Kansas City right now till they lose. It's tough to bet against them, but Houston's right there. And all of the, I mean, any of the kind of bad taste in the mouth that we harbored from that Vikings loss, that's all gone. That's all gone. And part of that loss, let's be honest here. Let's remember CJ was sick. That was their first game without Joe Mixon. Mixon got hurt during that game. So that could be why they lost to Minnesota. They might be better than Minnesota at full health. I don't know. Either way. So the Texans looked great. Nico Collins did get hurt, and that is concerning going forward. We'll see how they do, but I think Stephon Diggs can keep them afloat, and Tank Dell. They have weapons. Robert Woods and Mixon's gonna be back soon. So that's, I mean, yeah, they're fine on weapons. I think the Bills' take is that despite Allen playing terribly, they stayed in it, and that is something that we don't normally see from Buffalo. I mean, Josh Allen 9 for 30. I'm pretty sure I read it's the worst completion percentage by any quarterback ever when attempting 20 or more passes in a game. So he was not good, but no turnovers. And again, he did get his head hit really hard. I think maybe he had like a minor concussion. Probably shouldn't have even been playing. But again, the Bills battled back from a deficit even with Allen playing poorly. And no Khalil Shakir. James Cook playing a big role in that. The run game. They have a run game. They have, a solid defense. They got to a point where they could have won the game in the last drive. And they ended up losing by 23-20. That tells me that the Bills are a good football team. Because if you can compete against a great team when your quarterback is not playing well and your starting wide receiver is out, that is a sign of a great team. Because the rest of the team picked it up when Allen was struggling and with no Shakir. Now, again, do I think either of these teams can beat the Chiefs? No, I don't. Not right now, at least. But they both play them at some point this season, so that'll be kind of the metric test. I mean, they've both proved that they're good. Now the question is, how good? Let's talk about another good game. Ravens-Bengals. Ooh, what a good game that was. 41-38. Bengals should have won that game. Evan McPherson missing that kick in overtime. Kind of just a gut punch to Joe Burrow, who, I don't know what Joe Burrow's supposed to do. I mean, he leads the league in touchdowns with 12 through week 5. And he's done everything they could ask him to do. And they're 1-4. What a tough start. I still think they can make the playoffs. If they're playing this close, I mean, they played the Chiefs really close. They played the Ravens really close. Those are two great teams that they almost beat. I mean, they're a couple plays away from 3-2. And they lost to New England close. They win that game. They're 4-1. They lost to the Commanders close. All 4 of their losses are close. 3 of them are to good teams. Ravens, Commanders, Chiefs, all good losses. It just sucks that they all came bunched up. Their schedule will get lighter. They have some gimmies. Let's not pretend they can beat the Browns. They can beat the Steelers. They probably will. So I do think they can make the playoffs, even at 1-4. But it's going to take some turnaround. But with Joe playing the way he is, they absolutely could. Jamar having a great game. Jamar 2 touchdowns. T. Higgins also 2 touchdowns. What a gut punch, man. All that he did to see the defense struggle as bad as it did, you finally get that key takeaway in overtime, and McPherson blows it for you. Meanwhile, the Ravens, now at 3-2, they sure look like they put their early season struggles behind them. They really should be 4-1. Let's not pretend. They should have won that Raiders game. It feels like it did in 2019 and in 2023. Both years, slow start. They were 2-2 in 2019 and they were 2-2 in 2023. Both times they went on 8-game winning streaks. And they just stacked up a bunch of wins, and that could be happening again. They've won 3 straight. Washington, I think they'll probably win close. It's not that it's an easy schedule. It's actually a pretty hard schedule. Because after Washington, but again, it feels like a winnable schedule. After Washington, Tampa, tough game, but I think they're better. Cleveland, they can beat. Denver, and then Cincinnati week 10. They could be 7-2 or at least 6-3 going into that game against the Bengals. Then it's Steelers, Chargers. It gets a little harder. Steelers, Chargers, Eagles. Then they finish Giants, Steelers, Texans. Tough game. Big game on New Year's Day, I believe. And then Browns to finish it. The Ravens are a great team. Lamar is an MVP candidate. Lamar right now and CJ Stroud, I do think with CJ having never won it, Lamar just won it last year and already has 2. Probably CJ has the edge right now. Obviously, Mahomes hasn't played great, but he's undefeated. And then Josh is in there too. But he played a bad game, and the problem for Josh is because he lost to the Texans the way he did, if Josh and CJ turn out to be the best 2 quarterbacks when it's all said and done, and they have comparable stats, voters are going to look at it and say, well, head-to-head, CJ looked great and Josh looked awful. So CJ definitely has the leg up there. Meanwhile, let's talk some Cowboys-Steelers. What a game that was on Sunday night. The Cowboys needed a win badly. Steelers didn't need a win, but I think Justin Fields needed a win because Russell Wilson, they said it on the broadcast. He's ready to come back, and look, the more Tomlin doesn't, every time they ask Mike Tomlin, is Fields the starter, and he says no, that's just one more reason for me to believe that Russ is gonna be the starter when he's healthy. Because if clearly Tomlin doesn't want to name Fields the starter, there's a reason for that. If he really believed in Fields, he'd have named him the starter. So I think Russ is going to take that job from him. Fields didn't play amazing. He didn't play terribly. I don't think Justin Fields has been bad. I still think they should play Russ. I'm obviously biased. You see the hat. I'm obviously biased. But it is what it is. Dak, great finish, but he still turned the ball over twice. You can't do that. Turning the ball over twice is a recipe for a loss. And I'm sorry, Cowboys fans, but Dak has to be better than that. He has to be. Yeah, he had a great final drive and he hit Jalen Tolbert and it was awesome because nobody knows who he is. Sunday Night Football, what a finish. Dallas at 3-2, I think, is being overrated by the media the media wants Dallas to be good. Let's not pretend. There's an interest in the media for Dallas to be good. They feel like a mid-football team. They don't feel like a playoff team. I'm sorry. They feel, I think they're absolutely worse than Washington and probably worse than Philadelphia. And if they're the 3rd best team in their division, they're not a playoff team. That division's not even the best in the league. The NFC North is better, and I think the NFC South might be better. At least the top of the NFC South. Which, by the way, let's get into the top of the NFC South, because the Bucs and Falcons, they delivered us maybe one of the best Thursday Night Football games of all time. Yeah, that was a game. Kirk Cousins, Mr. Comeback. What? I mean, let's give Baker credit too. It's funny how narratives work. Because if Baker had won the game in overtime, if the Bucs win the coin toss, I think Baker goes down and wins them the game. And then the narrative is MVP Baker, 4-1, best team in the South. They'd have wins over the Falcons, Lions, and Commanders. That's a great resume, by the way. You start talking about, are they the best team in the NFC? Are they the biggest threat to the Chiefs? Is Baker an MVP candidate? That's what you start talking about if they win that game. Instead, They lose in overtime. Baker 3 touchdowns, but 2 picks. But his 3 touchdown performance goes basically completely unnoticed. Nobody's talking about him. The story is Kirk Cousins. 5 touchdowns? No, 4 touchdowns, 500 passing yards, including the game-winning touchdown. He's now win all 3 of their games. He's won them with comebacks in the fourth quarter and a game-winning drive. Remember, 2 years ago, he set an NFL record, 8 game-winning drives and 8 fourth-quarter comebacks with Minnesota. And he is right now looking like he may want to break his own record. Unbelievably clutch he is, and he's calm. He stays calm, like nobody else does. And he's really starting to remind me of a Matt Stafford or a Russell Wilson or an Aaron Rodgers or a Mahomes or a Brady, where it's like, he's down in the game and I trust him. And that's not something that I ever thought I'd be saying. I've always been a Kirk guy, but I've always been a Kirk guy when things are going well. I've always said, well, he struggles under pressure, and he struggles in big games, big moments, fourth quarters, primetime, Monday Night Football. Well, he's good in primetime now. He's won, I believe, 4 of his last 5 Monday night games after he started 1-9. So he's turned around his reputation as a bad primetime quarterback. He's also become perhaps the most clutch quarterback in the league in terms of fourth quarters, in terms of game-winning drives. Still sometimes struggles in big games, but he played well against the Chiefs. They almost beat the Chiefs. And the Bucks, that's a big game. I actually still think, though, the Bucks, I still think they might be the best team in that division. I know they lost. I still like Tampa to win that division. I think they play again. Tampa will win close. I think it'll be another great game, but I think Tampa wins close. And I think they win that division maybe by a tiebreaker. It's going to be really close. They both look good. They both look like they can make the playoffs. And credit to Baker, credit to Kirk. Both of them played out of their minds on Thursday night. The London game, Vikings-Jets. Vikings remaining undefeated. That's like the 6th game to get to. It was a great slate of NFL matches in Week 5. Vikings-Jets, though. Vikings, Sam Darnold revenge game, baby. And the Jets, meanwhile, fall below 500 and fired Robert Saleh. So instead of this being a Vikings segment, it's going to be more of a Jets segment. Credit to the Vikings. Their defense played great. No Aaron Jones, didn't seem to matter. Darnold didn't look amazing, but he did what he needed to do. He made the right throws. With Minnesota, it's very simple. I think they're a good team. Much better than I had. Preseason, I said they'd win 7 games. Now, they've already won 5. So they're probably a 10 or 11 win team when it's all said and done. Maybe they get to 12. They're going to lose some games. Sam Darnold is bound to have some bad games. But they feel like a playoff team, 10 or 11 wins, maybe 12. I still don't think they're as good as Detroit. And so that's why, I talked about it in my power rankings. Until they play Detroit next week, I think Detroit will win. And until I see Minnesota beat Detroit, I'm going to rank Detroit as a better team, even with their loss to Tampa, because I think Detroit is better than Minnesota. Now with the Jets. So Saleh's gone. May or may not have been because of Aaron Rodgers. Nathaniel Hackett also no longer calling plays. Man, dude, I wanted to believe in the Jets this year. I really did. And I think I think a big part of that was because I just wanted to see one more great season of a guy in Aaron Rodgers who I watched growing up as a kid. And when I was a kid, he was a legend. He was a legend. He was the best quarterback in the NFL for about 6 years. Right? It was Manning. When I first got into football was right when Rodgers took over, because Manning got hurt, and then it was like, okay, Manning's no longer the best, and he had a good season. Peyton Manning had an amazing MVP season in 2013, maybe one of the best seasons of all time. But even at that point, the general consensus was that Rodgers was the best quarterback in the league for that 5-year stretch. Because Manning had one great year in those 5 years. Rodgers had like 4 great years in those 5 years. And he won a Super Bowl, and he won 4 MVPs. But at the later stages of his career, what happened? Well, he stopped winning in the playoffs. He lost 4 straight NFC championship games. Brady, meanwhile, Brady won 4 more Super Bowls. So all of a sudden, Rodgers wasn't the best anymore. He had been surpassed by a 40-year-old Tom. And then they both got surpassed by Mahomes. So even when he left Green Bay, he was no longer the top quarterback in the league. He was like maybe the 5th or 6th best. It was Mahomes and Allen, Lamar, Burrow, and Rodgers was still considered to be a top 10 quarterback when he left Green Bay, but the injury has clearly set him back. And it feels to me like this isn't going to work. And I kind of wish he would have just retired. I hate to say that. Because the offense doesn't look great. The defense is fine, but coaching problems, cadence issues, receivers aren't catching balls, Rodgers is making bad throws. He threw 3 picks against Minnesota. You can't win when you throw 3 interceptions. I know it was close in the end, 23-17, but you can't win by throwing 3 interceptions. You can't win the amount of times the Jets faced 3rd and long. It's incredible that they were even competitive. They lost to Denver, ugly. I think Jets fans thought they would be 4-1. I think they thought the Vikings would be an easier win than they thought, and I think obviously Denver we thought they would win that game. But you're 2-3, and I think they'll lose to Buffalo, and then there'll be 2-4. They'll be 2-4. They'll be 2 back of the division. They'll be at least a game back of the wild card. And now with an interim head coach, Jeff Ulbrich, all power to you. I kind of feel bad for the guy because he's in a tough situation. So we'll see. Meanwhile, the 49ers, they lost to the Cardinals. Brock Purdy struggling a little bit without Christian McCaffrey. 2 interceptions, including on the last drive of the game. Also, Jordan Mason, he fumbled the game away. So I don't want to be too harsh on Purdy because I think Purdy's been playing fine this season. He hasn't been as good as he was last year when he had McCaffrey, but Purdy's been, about the 12th or 13th best quarterback in the league this year. Jordan Mason fumbling at the goal line shifted everything because the Niners they were down by 1 when he fumbled. And if he scores there, now you're up 6. Right? Instead, no, they were up by 2 when he fumbled. If he scores there, you're up by 9. Maybe 10 if you go for 2. Instead, not only did he not score, he gave the ball back to Arizona, who drove down, kicked a field goal to take the lead. So they had that game in the bag. They had it won, and they fumbled it away, and then Brock Purdy, of course, the interception. Tough way to go down, man. The Cardinals sneakily are right there for the division. They're a game back of Seattle. So if the Cardinals beat the Packers and the Niners beat the Seahawks, it would be a 3-way tie atop that division, and then the Cardinals would technically be on top. They're not out of this thing yet. They are not out of this thing yet. Arizona and Kyler Murray are very much alive, partially because the Seahawks looked so embarrassing against the Giants. Man, what a tough game that was for the Seattle Seahawks. How do you lose like that? At home, the Giants, 29-20. Geno was fine. Geno was decent, but it was not a good game for the Seahawks. Let's not kid ourselves. You can't win when you look like that. At home, couldn't move the ball in the first half of the game. Couldn't get a stop in the second half of the game. Daniel Jones moving the ball up and down the field with perfect accuracy, and Tyrone Tracy running all over you. Seattle, to their credit, again, similar to Buffalo, they still kept it close enough. They were a field goal away from tying it and sending it to overtime, but it got blocked. Probably that's what they deserved, though, based off the way that they played. They fall to 3-2. And the Giants, the frisky Giants, now 2-3. Denver also, they move up to 3-2. Talk about frisky, man. The Denver Broncos. Bo Nix is starting to look a lot better. Minshew has been benched. Makes sense. Aiden O'Connell's going to start for them. Bo Nix is starting to look good. Already feels better than it was with Russ. Can Denver make the playoffs this year? They could. I don't know if they will. They could. The problem for them is it's a tough division because they still have to play the Chargers twice and the Chiefs twice. And I hate to say this, but you can probably pencil in 4 losses. And they already have 2. So then that puts them up to 6 losses. You basically have to be perfect outside of your division games. It's not going to be easy, but a good win against the Raiders. Peyton looks happy. Nix looks happy. They started off the game down 10-0, and then they reeled off 34-8 to finish out that game. Gardner Minshew, they knocked him out of the game. Denver's defense, second half of last season, it started getting a lot better after that. I mean, they were terrible in the first half, 70-20 game. But they started improving last year, and they keep getting better. Patrick Surtain is the real deal. He's locking down top receivers. I think this team could make a very interesting run towards the playoffs. Again, don't know if they'll get there. Don't know if they're ready yet. But man, they're fun and they're exciting. Meanwhile, the Dolphins with Tyler Huntley defeating the New England Patriots, who have announced that they are going to be starting Drake May next week. That should be fun. See his debut. Probably he should have been the starter all season long. Jacoby Brissett, the 6 games, probably the last 6 games he'll ever start in his career. And for good measure, he's not a good quarterback. Dolphins at 2-3, still technically in it. They have a bye, then they play the Colts. If Tyler Huntley can somehow beat Joe Flacco and the Colts in a couple weeks, they'd be 3-3 when Tua is supposedly going to return. I don't think he should, but if they're 3-3, he's going to. And to their credit, the AFC's kind of weak this year. They could make the playoffs still. 15-10 was the final score. Patriots were very close, actually, to getting their second win of the season. But they do not. They cannot pull off the upset. It is the Dolphins who claim the win. Snoop Huntley's first win of the season. And finally, the Colts losing to the Jaguars 37-34. Not Flacco's fault. Old man Flacco had a great game. He continues to just defy all expectations as he has become a backup quarterback. He went from being like the most mid starter ever to being like the greatest backup of all time. I guess it makes sense. Take a decent starter, turn him into a backup, and it usually works. So good job, but he's old. Hot take, is he the best veteran quarterback in the league? Is he better than Aaron Rodgers? Might be. He's playing better than Stafford. Stafford just got embarrassed by the Packers. Playing better than Russ, who sits on the bench while he's hurt. The Flacco Sons, it's tough for the Colts, man, because I think they can make the playoffs, but I'm not sure if they make it without Flacco under center. And at the same time, you might have to sacrifice a winning season just to figure out what do you have in Anthony Richardson. Tough spot for them to be in.